All right. So, Efia, welcome to Hey Sunshine, the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. So, I'm so excited to chat about all things manifestation. And I've heard a little bit about your journey, but I'm so excited today to pick your brain about all things manifestation, magic, getting into alignment, and really calling in our heart's desires. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, good. So I love to start with a question about magic. So what is magic to you?
I think magic is really being able to recognize those beautiful moments in the everyday. I think there's this misconception that magic needs to be out of this world, incredible, amazing moments, but we actually have so many beautiful, incredible moments in the day to day. And I think magic is being able to recognize each of those in the external world and also being able to recognize them in yourself as well.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And it's really like we find these moments by slowing down. It's not in like the fast pace of life. It's like the small things like a sunset or a sunrise, or, I've got this frangipani tree blooming in the backyard and I'm like, oh, that is magic to me. So
Totally, yeah.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. So I thought we could start with your journey and your story and like how manifestation came to be a really big part of your life.
I think manifestation came to be a really big part of my life when I was going through a particularly challenging period of my own life. I had just finished my first degree and I went back to uni later that year to study my master's. And I was really struggling with anxiety, depression. At that point, I had an undiagnosed chronic illness, but I now know it to be endometriosis. So
Yeah.
physically, emotionally, mentally, I was just exhausted. And manifestation really came into my life at a time when I didn't realize I needed it, but
Mhm.
I really needed to believe in something really deeply again, and believing that there was more out there for me, that you had the power to create your own reality, to change your situation, to choose how you wanted things to go, and also to know that when things didn't look externally like they were going as you wanted them to, that you were still supported and held through all of that. And so I was in a network marketing company at this time, and my mentor had introduced me to my first personal development books, and then that had led to The Secret and
Yeah.
into manifestation. I was like, yes, we are getting on this train. Told my friends, I was like,
So
vision
good.
board parties, we're changing our lives. And
Oh God,
then
this sounds heaven.
they were like, okay, like you seem excited about this, let's see. But like it's funny because the first year or so, I think, people, they just want the best for you and they want you to be happy. And then it comes to a point when people are like, wait, how did you do that thing that
Yeah.
you did? And you're like, okay, now I'm not the crazy one anymore. I get it.
That's so awesome. And I want to know what was like your gateway. I know you said you were in the network marketing, and I think in that scene, it is very much like personal development and growth. But what was like, apart from The Secret, the first book that kind of got you hooked in? Or was it like Wayne Dyer, or, it was the first gateway drug for you?
So I read initially, the first personal development book that I remember reading was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Suzanne Jeffers.
Oh.
I just thought that was such an incredible book. And then from there, I just read whatever I could get my hands on. And also the other thing is like, it had never seemed that abstract to me because as a child I'd grown up Buddhist, so there were a lot of parallels I could see between spirituality and Buddhism.
Yeah.
And my mom was quite a spiritual person as well. Like I didn't really pick up on it when I was a child because that was just the way that we lived our lives, but like looking back now I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that was a little bit different.
That's so interesting. And you grew up in Scotland, didn't you?
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
very, very, very rural town in Scotland.
Yeah. Wow. It's like what a contrast like to your life now. That'd be massive.
It was huge, but yeah, it just I think it set me up to be like
Yeah.
where I am now. Like I'm definitely not a small town kind of person now, but I think growing up there was like the best childhood in so many ways.
And it's really like you probably learned all of the things that you need to kind of get to this point now, and teaching what you're teaching, which is, yeah, amazing. So when you did start your manifestation journey and you were getting into all the personal development books and really like growing yourself, what were the sort of first manifestations that started to drop through? And were you kind of like, oh, this is a coincidence, or what did it sort of feel like for you?
So, because like I mentioned at the time, I'd gone back to uni and I was kind of struggling, not from a sense that it wasn't even that I was finding uni hard in terms of the work. It was like I wasn't
Mm.
enjoying what I was doing and like my heart wasn't really in it. And so I remember creating this vision board, and like in the center of the vision board was like me graduating from my degree, which at that time it seemed like um it could have gone one of two ways. Like I could have like quite not happily dropped out, but I didn't want to continue anymore. And it felt like I might have dropped out. I'd stopped going to classes for a couple of months, which was extremely unlike me. And I
Mm.
was having like meetings with my lecturers and stuff to see like what direction I wanted to take things in. And so for me, at the end of the year, not only like graduating my degree, getting a really high passing degree and graduating months before everyone else did because I
Yeah,
finished all my work so early, that was like a huge one for me.
that's
And moving overseas was something that I'd wanted to do, and all that coming to fruition. So pretty much everything that I had put on my first vision board was coming to life. And also the most important thing was not just like physically all the things that were happening and the experiences that I was getting to have, but how I was feeling internally was
mm,
changing, and I felt completely different. Like I felt so much hope and excitement for what the future had to hold.
that's so beautiful. And I'm curious about what your manifestation practice looked like back then. Obviously, it's probably shifted and you've got your own style now, but you just start off with the classic vision boarding and, thinking it to be true?
Yeah, so vision boarding was a big part. And also, I went to therapy. I knew that, like, one of the things I had wanted to do was move overseas. And I've been talking to one of my friends about it. We're like, yes, we're planning this. And I was like, I realized that I wouldn't be able to move overseas. I mean, well, I could have, but I wouldn't have been able to confidently move overseas the way that I was feeling, because I knew that I was still going to feel that way just in a different country. And I knew that if I was going to like leave my entire life behind, go to a different country, I wanted to feel much better mentally within myself.
Mhm.
So going to therapy was actually a big part of my manifestation process, and not in the way that I expected it to be. I really had a lot of hopes and a lot resting on it. I really thought that was going to be the thing to help me change my life.
Mm.
And and I ended up getting therapy, which was a very challenging process because we have the National Health Service in Scotland, which means like free healthcare, but also the resources are actually stretched to the limit. So I had been for a year been
Mm.
trying to get into therapy. Like, I think I need to see someone. I was like pretty self-aware. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I know this isn't how I'm supposed to be feeling. Um, and I just kept getting knocked back. And eventually one of my friends had come to the doctors with me and was like, she really needs to see someone. This is a crucial situation.
Yeah.
And they'd got me in the next month. And I was like, oh yes, this is it. I was so ready to go to therapy. And then my therapist and I, we just didn't like each other at all. It was just very apparent that we didn't like each
Yeah.
other. And it was a real struggle to be really vulnerable and open with someone when you don't like them. And I'm sure she
Totally.
felt the same for me, that maybe it was difficult for her to help me move through things, and we just didn't gel at all.
Yeah.
And so, although that wasn't what I wanted it to be, it was a catalyst that allowed me to make some of my own shifts and to begin the process of like looking at things differently,
Mm.
being more analytical over certain things and not just taking like anxious thoughts at face value. And
Mm.
I think beginning to look at changing my thought process is still one of the most important things now when it comes to
Mm.
manifestation, because although I'm not depressed anymore, I definitely still experience anxiety, and I definitely have my own limiting beliefs and trauma. And it's really important that you're able to have a compassionate relationship to yourself while you're working through all of those things.
Mm.
Because in order to manifest the life you desire, you also need to be looking at all the things that are happening in the background too.
Totally. And I feel like you touch on a really important point. Sometimes when we manifest something that we think we really want. So for you, example, like you manifested the therapist and it didn't turn out the way that you planned, but then that actually was the catalyst for your next step. I think it's a really important point, because sometimes it doesn't turn out the way we want it, but it is actually what, God, universe, spirit has planned for us in our journey. So has that sort of been like a similar sort of thread that you might receive a manifestation, it doesn't feel like, or it doesn't look like what you thought it was, but it led to the next thing that was like perfectly aligned?
Oh, so many different situations. And I guess it's inspiring in a way, because when you're going through things and you're like, oh, I thought this would like kind of be turning out differently, you're like, but pretty much everything else up until this point has gone that way as well.
Yeah.
So maybe this is working out the way that I want it to. So
Mm.
yeah, it allows you to just be more detached, I guess, from when you're manifesting things. So like it has to happen this exact way. And if it doesn't happen this exact way, then it means something about me as a person.
Mm.
Like the things I manifest don't mean anything about me, whether I manifest like amazing, incredible experience or I manifest things I didn't necessarily want. Neither of those mean anything about who I am as a person. And I think it's
Mm.
really important to not internalize any of those things about being about your worth or anything to do with you, because they are just experiences and things that happen. And yes, it's
Mm.
amazing to have these experiences and things that happen, but it can get dangerous when we attribute them to too much of one way or too much of the other.
Yeah, and sort of build like an identity around like, I need this to be something, or
Yeah,
I need this to
exactly.
feel enough. So I want to talk about like, so old school manifestation, aka like The Secret, all of that sort of vibe, versus your like method now. What would you say like the main differences between the two?
I think focusing on having an awareness about conscious and your subconscious mind. Like the subconscious mind has so much impact on the way that you manifest your desires into reality. And also when I'm working with my clients, we're focusing very much on how do you want to show up in this world? Who do you want to be? What do you value more than like, oh, I'm just focusing on the materialistic things, which I think maybe is an introduction for a lot of people into manifestation, because
Yeah.
they're seeing that online and like, oh, this person manifested X, I want to manifest X. But it goes so much deeper than that. And I think it is at its core, manifestation is about relationships. It's a relationship you have with yourself, with the universe, with the people in your life. And those things are constantly evolving.
So for someone who's sitting here right now being like, I've tried the manifestation stuff, it's not working for me, maybe they're feeling like their trust muscle isn't quite as strong as they want it to be. What would be some like tips for them to kind of like build that strength back and that trust with the universe, and start to sort of maybe even call in like smaller manifestations?
Well, the first thing I would say is when people say it doesn't work for me or it's not working for me, I'm like, well, how do you know?
Mm.
They're like, just because you don't have the end result doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't working. Like,
Yeah.
for example, let's say when you're trying to get pregnant, it's not like you're pregnant from the moment that's like growing inside you, not when you have the baby in your hand. So there are so
Mm.
many micro steps to actually having your manifestation. How do you actually know that it isn't working? And
Yeah.
actually, I would even turn that question on its head, but to how do I know it's working? And I would like journal and I would write that question. I would reply to that
Mm.
prompt. I'm like, what evidence can I see that things are going my way, that things are manifesting? And we have a tendency to be negative and looking for the danger. We have to consciously remind ourselves to shift our thought patterns and look for what we
Mm.
actually want to see and then act in alignment with that. So I personally feel a lot better when I'm like, what evidence is there that my
Yeah.
desires are coming to life, rather than what evidence do I have that nothing's working and I'm never going to get what I want. So I always think where possible, and when you can get yourself into that frame of mind where you can
Mm.
shift your perspective and shift the questions you ask yourself. There's that quote like, the quality of your life is based on the quality of questions you ask yourself.
Yeah.
But I think it goes a step further than that, because you can ask yourself a question and then do nothing with that information. So it's like the questions and what you decide to do next. And
Mm.
also, if you're feeling frustrated, frustration is a normal feeling. It's okay to feel frustrated or angry or sad or annoyed. And rather than try and push those feelings down and pretend that you don't feel them, well, why not like witness those feelings and witness yourself experiencing those feelings and just like allow them to come up and pass? It's when we're like trying to suppress everything and pretend that, oh, I don't feel this because like, oh, that's not a good manifestation
Feeling. Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
like, actually all of our emotions are incredibly important. And
Mm.
the universal law of duality is like every plus has a minus, every positive has a negative, and each of those things are important. So it's easy to get down on yourself and to beat yourself up about things and to
Yeah.
feel like everyone else's life is maybe moving at a quicker rate than yours or moving differently from yours. But we can't possibly know like the depths of someone else's experience or how
Mhm.
things are truly going in their life. All we can know is our own, and all that we have power over is our own journey as well.
Yeah.
And I choose for that to be an empowering experience no matter what externally is going on.
That is so powerful. So I wonder if you've heard of pineapple season.
Yes, I have
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Melanie and so for anyone who's listening, Melanie and Leah has this concept, and it's based on something truth as well. But so it's called pineapple season. And so pineapples take, I think it's 18 months to harvest. So she talks about it in the context of like your dreams and manifestations and desires. So right now we're planting all of our, seeds, and then like the next week we're digging it up and being like, why hasn't it worked yet? But really, like, our dreams and goals and desires are pineapples in a way, and it can take so long. But as long as we're, as you said, taking those daily action steps and we're planting the seeds, it's like, then when the harvest comes, like, it will be bountiful, it will be plentiful, but we need to give it that gestation period to actually grow and develop itself. Which is, when I heard that, I'm like, it blows my mind, and it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also not just like making sure that we're planting seeds and that we're taking the action, but you're like consciously looking for anything that could potentially be a weed that is going to like sabotage that plant from fully growing. So like, what beliefs, what thought patterns, even what actions am I doing that are actually moving against me rather than moving me forward?
So say if we do spot a weed and it's a negative thought pattern, like, what would be something that you would do to pull it out, so to say?
I think we have to remember, like, at our core, we're actually all pretty similar in that we want to keep ourselves safe, we want to live, we want to exist, and that's your subconscious mind's job, is to keep you alive.
Yeah.
So with most, pretty much, I would say most things that we want to manifest into our existence, your subconscious mind is going to be working against you because it's so
Mm,
different from anything you've ever experienced. And from a really practical perspective, the best way to keep you alive is by doing the same thing that we've always done every single day for the end of the time, because
yeah.
your subconscious mind's job is to keep you alive, not to help you thrive. Whereas consciously, super
Mm,
consciously, you're like, I want to thrive, I want to live my best life. And those two things are at odds with each other. So when you do find that you are subconsciously sabotaging, or maybe even consciously sabotaging yourself, you have to understand where this sabotage is coming from at its root. And it's not because you're out here trying to make your life miserable, it's because you want to live and you're trying to protect yourself. So when you can see, oh, the reason why I'm doing this, and you're looking for the positive reason behind those limiting beliefs, the positive reasons behind the sabotage, then you can begin to think like, okay, well, how can I give this to myself in a more productive way? If I'm doing this to make me feel safe, or if I'm doing this to make me feel loved, if, for example, in relationships and you often have like screaming matches with your partner or something, it's not because you like don't love them or you want the relationship to end, it's because you're like scared. So how can you
mm,
have that, for example, oh, I could actually have a conversation, or I could take a time out where I take some time for myself to think about what thoughts I actually want to collect together and then go and speak to them. So it's always thinking about your inner self as if it's a little child, because
yeah.
your subconscious mind is. And yes, you want to take responsibility, but we also want to have a compassionate outlook to ourselves.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think anytime that like we're sabotaging, it is just like our little inner child just being like, I want to feel safe or seen or heard. It's like when we come back to it, it is so simple, and we don't need to overcomplicate it. So I want to touch on that playing small aspect, because I think sometimes when we are casting our list, and we're writing down our goals and writing down our manifestations, we can tend to play small. And it's like, I'm going to absolutely butcher this statement, but it's like we overestimate what we can do in a year, and then underestimate what we can do in 5. So how would you suggest, or do you have any tips about writing our manifestation list and making sure we're not playing small?
I think always begin with like the best possible scenario. Like if anything could happen, and I know that seems like such a big statement and maybe one that you still can't quite wrap your head around, but I think it's always best to come from like a top down approach rather than I'm going to set the smallest possible thing. And then if it works, because you're not fully like putting your trust in things yet. So for me, I am someone who has a lot going on in my mind at any
Yeah.
one given moment in time. And I cannot focus on several goals. I could focus on a couple,
Mm,
but I have hundreds of things that I'm manifesting at any given moment, but I'm not consciously focusing my awareness on all of those things. So I have a journal which is like lifetime things I want to manifest in my entire lifetime. And given that I'm going to live till probably 80 plus, there's
yeah.
a lot of things that I want to have in there, and I can't be
Mm,
thinking about all of those every second of every day because it's just too much. So start from there, like in your lifetime, like what would you like to happen? It can be anything. And then you can go from there to like on a more micro level, what's something that you'd like to achieve in like the next 5 years or the next year, and then bring it down, bring it down, bring it down until it feels like more achievable, rather than just starting with something smaller and then, oh, if it works, I guess I can change it to something else. It's like looking for a house and you're like, oh, this is the house that I really want, but I'm just going to like go for this one because this is the one that I think I'm going to be able to get. Or in
Mm.
my life, I had this situation a few years ago. Actually, it was a lot longer because I was at
Yeah.
uni like 7, 8 years ago. When I
Yeah.
was at uni, in my second last year at uni, I had the opportunity to go for this scholarship where this charity in Scotland, they wanted to inspire entrepreneurs
Mm.
in Scotland. So what they would do is send people in their penultimate year of university in these global internships, and everything would be paid for, your flights, accommodation, and you would get to live in a different country and experience work over there. And I had made it down to the short list from 1,000 to the last 100 people who were getting to pick their
Yeah.
internships. And the one that I really, really wanted was the one in San Diego. I just thought it'd be incredible. I'd always wanted to go to California. And
Mm.
the one that I knew I would 100% definitely get was the one that was in Scotland, but I was already living in Scotland, so it wasn't that big a jump for me. But the one in San Diego, I was 20 at the time. Oh, yes, it was 9 years ago.
Mm.
Wow. I
That
was
happened
20 at the
ago.
time.
Yeah.
And they wanted to pick people who, number one, could drive, which I couldn't do, and
Mhm.
number two, were 21 because of the drinking age and being able to socialize and do things in the US. And I wanted to just, it would be an amazing experience to get any of those internships. I was like, oh, I should just go for the one that I know I'll definitely get. But something inside me was like, but just go for the one that you really want. So I went
Yeah.
for the one that I really wanted. And on the interview, he did bring up the things like, you're not gonna be able to do this, you're not gonna do this. And I was like, yeah, I don't mind. I'm just like, I really want to work for this company.
Mm.
And I ended up getting the internship. And also the internship was for 3 people. And at the last minute, they had decided to make it for 4 people.
Oh
So
my
one
God.
of us ended up being an extra person. And we don't know who the extra person was, but imagine like I'd not gone for it. And they'd like, oh, we create space for someone else. I would have been
That is so
devastated.
crazy. So, and how long
So
was it for? Were you over there for like a couple months?
yeah, we were over there for 3 months and then we
Yeah.
traveled for 2.5 weeks afterwards.
Oh my God. That is so cool. I love that. And a big part of that, it sounds like, was your intuitive hits that you were getting and being like, no, I'm not going to play small here. I'm going to go for like, the top thing that I want. So how does intuition play into your manifestations now? And what does it feel like?
It honestly underpins everything that I do now because for the longest time, I am actually quite an analytical and strategic person. I like have my little plans and stuff, my
Yeah.
to-do list. Like I'm sitting in my office with whiteboard, and like, I love it. But also, like, there were some things that just make no logical sense. And manifestation is a very big area where you'll notice that being true, where things just don't make sense. And you have to trust that knowing, trust that inside voice more than you trust other people's outside opinions.
Mhm.
And as much as we can want people to contribute to deciding what's best for us or help us with things, we are ultimately the ones that know ourselves best and have that direct channel to the universe on our fate, right? We can't ask someone else to do that for us. So for me, my intuition is more of a feeling. It's a knowing. I feel most connected to my intuition when I'm meditating. I meditate
Yeah.
every single day. And sometimes I might go in there of an intention of like, oh, I want to figure out the answer to this. Or sometimes I might just go in there and I'm meditating because I know that this sets me up for the day, and I'll get like themes or messages come through. And maybe I don't even understand what it means at that point in time. But later on, it will mean something to me. And I had an experience a couple of years ago where I had been consciously practicing manifestation for some time, but I was still, you never stop learning.
Yeah.
And I had a meditation where a theme that came through for me was boundaries, and it didn't really make a lot of sense to me at the time. I didn't really see any areas where my boundaries were being tested. And
Mhm.
then a couple of weeks later, I had lost my job due to the pandemic, and I was not entitled to any funding as I'm from the UK living in Australia. So basically my income had disappeared overnight. And I was offered this opportunity to work for someone that I had really respected and admired. And
Mhm.
then she had asked me to work for her for free for 3 weeks. And it was just like, it didn't make sense. Like I was
Yeah.
really qualified in what she was asking me to do. And although I needed the money from a technical sense, and it would have been like, oh well, this is going to guarantee some money for the future, it really crossed a lot of boundaries that I had set for myself. So I said
Massive.
no, even though like logically it seemed like, but you need the money, because it just, I had to follow my heart, I had to follow my intuition. And then a few
Yeah.
weeks later, I ended up getting an opportunity that was way better, and I'm
Oh.
glad I stuck to my guns and I had space for it. And so you might not always see where that decision is leading you. And that's really where the trust comes in, because you're not going to see the whole path like laid out from A to Z. And I didn't know at that point, like I'm turning down something. Okay, that wasn't actually turning down something great at that point, but I was turning down something which could
Yeah.
have maybe been something. And you just have to take a massive leap of faith when it comes to your
Mm.
intuition. But you also have to remember, like, you've got yourself to this point in your life, like however many years you've had in this lifetime already.
Yeah.
You have managed to get through them all. You've achieved so many incredible things in this lifetime. And it's not a question of, am I making the right choice? Am I making the wrong choices? Like, am I making a choice that feels true for me at this moment in time?
Yeah.
And aiming to follow truth rather than right or wrong, I feel, is a much more rewarding and empowering journey.
Mm. And the part that you just touched on, it was like when, because I kind of want to go down to that, like creating space and actually like stepping into your worth, because I think that's a massive part of manifestation. But yeah, it's interesting. You kind of like, you put in the boundary and said, no, I'm not going to go down this path, which then energetically opened up, you know, the space for this new thing to drop in. So like, do you believe that sometimes we're tested in our manifestation, or we're challenged, like it's a dangling carrot, like do you actually want what you say you want? Do you believe we're actually tested, you know, around the time of before that something big is going to drop in for us?
I believe yes and no. Like, I don't love to use the phrasing testing, because then sometimes people can see it as like, oh no, I failed or I
Failed,
passed,
yeah,
or
yeah,
yeah. But I
yeah.
do think the universe gives us opportunities to gain more clarity on what we actually want and to strengthen our beliefs. And we can choose whether to go along with those, or at a later point, you know, it might be a lesson that needs to keep being repeated, and it's going to show up in different
Mm,
people or different experiences, that we're going to keep experiencing that same thing until we take what we truly need to get out of it. And I think that doesn't have to be something that you're scared of, like, oh no, like what's my test from the
yeah.
universe going to be about this thing that I set? But it's
Yeah.
just something to be like, to be aware of and
Mm.
say, like, what do I want to take from this? What do I want to make this experience? And you get to choose.
Yeah, I kind of like it like a game now. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that
Hmm.
that's popping up when I've just asked for this. And I think the more that you sort of zoom out and, like as you said before, the less attached you are, you can kind of see the energetics of how things are playing out. You're like, well, I wonder if I take that away, like I wonder what, you know, will fill into that space. So can you talk a little bit about like the energetics of creating space and making room for our desires to sort of drop in?
So, one of the things I talk about in my 5 step manifestation method is energetic blocks and boundaries. And this can be limiting beliefs, traumas, and also boundaries, which is the time and energy which we're giving to things. And when we're giving our time and our energy around to people, to places, to experiences that aren't serving us, it is actually taking that time and energy away from all the things that do. And it has to get to a point where you draw a line in the sand around your time and energy. And you also place a value on that as well, because we only have so much that we can dedicate to each day. And we have to be really mindful of how we want that to be spent. And I know, particularly for women, that setting boundaries can be really challenging, because you don't want to be viewed a certain way. I know I've
Yeah.
definitely been called some interesting names in the past, and you have to
Yeah.
like kind of get on board with the fact that not everyone is necessarily going to respect the decisions that you make, but you're going to respect yourself, which is the most important thing in any situation. And sometimes it isn't going to be a massive boundary that someone else is going to push back against, but oftentimes people are going to push back against those boundaries, and it's going to like cause you to question yourself, and maybe even like gaslight yourself a little bit, like, oh, like maybe they were right, maybe like I didn't need to say that or set boundaries around my time. But you know yourself, you know, again, it comes back to, you know yourself best, and you do have to create that energetic space for what you want to come in, and also prove to yourself that you're serious about what you want to do, about what you energetically want to create. And I think it's a really, really powerful lesson for yourself. And the more you set those boundaries, the more comfortable it becomes to say things to people. So for me, I used to be a massive people pleaser. um
Yeah.
I really just wanted everyone else to be happy. I'm also someone who's like
Mm.
super extroverted. I love spending time with other people. So I would definitely cross my own boundaries in favor of other people. Whereas now I will like set boundaries around the smallest things. My friend will be like, "Do you want to come up today?" I'm like, "No, don't have anything planned for today, but I just want to
I
just want to
don't
spend
want
time by
anything.
myself." I would actually just rather stay in bed and watch Netflix. And they're like, "Okay, cool." Or, you know, some certain days I just like I got asked out on a date recently to the cinema, and I was just like, I actually don't go with other people to the cinema. I will only go to cinema by myself. I feel
It's
like
so good.
other people just drag me down when I go to cinema. So I'm like,
Yeah, and
thanks
then
for your
like
vibe, but no.
they talk through the movies and you're like, shut up. I'm like,
Yes,
I want to just
exactly. I'm
also
trying to get in the zone. You're ruining it for me here.
and like who goes on a first date to the movies? Like, I'm sorry. That's like I want to talk to you. I want to get to know you. I don't want to like
Yeah.
watch a movie.
He was like, oh, well, I was going to ask you to dinner in the cinema, but obviously that's not for you. I was just like, sorry, I just don't enjoy that.
No.
Shopping with other people, I hate that as well. Whenever my friends invite me shopping, I'm like, I'm not coming. Like,
Oh
I
my
just
God.
I need to be alone for this. I do like other people. I know it sounds like I don't, but there's
Just
like
massive
specific
introvert.
instances. I'm like,
Yeah.
I cannot be around other people for these things. And setting those boundaries. Whereas in the past, I would have gone along and I would have just been like miserable and annoyed. And that's not good
Yeah.
for anyone who's in that situation. So setting those boundaries is respect for yourself, but it's also respect for those other people as well.
100%. Because if you're there and you're not enjoying it or you don't want to be there, like it'll just be so like so on show that you can't hide it really. So what about like manifestation and dating? Like, do you believe that we can sort of call in our partner? And do you have any tips for someone who's like calling in their person?
Absolutely believe that we can call in our partner. Like if you think about all your friends, you
Mm,
think about the ways that they've come into your life. I don't feel like a romantic relationship is that different. Although we may put a romantic relationship on a pedestal, there's still a person nonetheless. So I think number one is getting really intentional about what you actually want in a partner. What are some non-negotiables for you? What are some would likes and
mm,
some things that are like, this is absolutely, this person has to be this or do this or not do this. And that just is in line with my values. And
mm,
also knowing that you're not just expecting this person to come into your life and fill a void, that the things that you're like, oh, I wish I had someone who made me feel really beautiful, and you're not feeling that way yourself and you're just expecting this person to come. That's a really dangerous position to put
yeah.
someone else in, to have like that much power over your life. Because
Mm,
of course you're like, oh, I'm going to manifest my soulmate who I'm going to be with for the rest of your life. But then if you're not, and you've taken away, oh, the person that makes me feel beautiful, the person that's the only way I get my confidence from, like, you never want to put that much into other people. It's also not fair to put that on another person. So figuring out what you want in another person, thinking out what you want in a relationship, and then ensuring that those things that you want in a relationship are things that you're giving to yourself. So I always recommend that people, whether you're in a relationship or you're looking for a relationship, that you make time for solo dates, whether it's
mm,
taking yourself out for dinner or just spending some mindful time at home, like getting to know yourself and building this relationship with yourself. Because then when you do meet other people, they are adding to an already incredible experience, and
mm,
hopefully it's bringing together two people who are already like somewhat self-aware, somewhat really know what they want and are assured in themselves, that are creating something beautiful and something new together, not
mm,
adding or taking away from each other. And that's the kind of energy that attracts the people that you want to attract to you as well. And I
yeah.
think that's a really, really beautiful place to be in. And I think that manifesting a relationship really takes a lot of patience, but you have
Mm,
to remember that this is like your, well, if you believe in soulmates or not. I
yeah.
personally don't believe in the one, but I do love
Yeah.
to use the term soulmate. And I think, when you're attracting someone who's going to have such a big piece of your life, a piece of and your heart and your soul, and
Mm,
so much personal relationship to you, that you don't want to rush that. It doesn't matter whether it takes 1 year or it takes 2 years or 3 years, and maybe it'll feel a little bit frustrating during that time. But I would
mm,
rather wait for that person rather than just like fill the void
settle
with
for
someone,
anything.
not to be lonely. Like there's just
Yeah.
no point to that. It's a waste of my time.
So I have a funny story about calling in my partner. So we've been together maybe a year and a half now. And so it probably took about 4 years to call him in. And like, I'm not the most patient of persons. So I was like, what is going on? And like, I'd written my list. And I remember it was maybe like 3 years after I'd written my list. And I went over it and I was like, holy shit, so much of this is just coming from ego. Is this even what I want anymore? And I remember like I did a burning ritual and I burnt the list, and then I wrote a new list, and on my list it was everything that I wanted to call in, that I wanted him to be like or be doing. And I was like, where am I, as you said, where am I not giving this to myself, or where do I need to step in this to sort of get into alignment to call him in? And then it was like, I think it was only like 6 months, no, even less, maybe like 3 months after I redid that list, that he sort of came in, and I was like, okay, cool. That was the missing piece to it all.
Yes, I love
So
that.
funny. Yeah.
And I think as well, like when it comes to on a more like practical level of things that we're practically doing to bring people in, we have to be really mindful of the way that we're talking about, whether it's men, women, or other, and the way that we're speaking, like whether you're saying like, oh, all people are this way, or, you know, if you had a relationship that maybe wasn't so positive in the past and you're thinking all people are like this, that there's maybe some more work to be done. Like whenever my friends are like talking about men, I'm like, oh, men are this way, I'm like, but not all of
Not
them,
all
just some
of
of
them.
them, just some of them. Take
Oh
it
my
back, shouldn't
God.
be in it, shouldn't be in it. You know, you have to be really conscious of the things that you're saying, because then
Yeah.
you're creating an echo chamber for yourself, and even if that person isn't that way, that's the view that you've built for yourself, that
Mm,
and you're going to find evidence to affirm whatever dominant belief you have. So I
100%.
choose to believe that there are incredible, soulful, loving humans out there, and those are the people that I'm attracted to me. And I'm
Yeah.
looking for evidence of that, rather than like no one can be trusted. So
Yeah.
just be mindful of like what your actual beliefs are, rather than what you think you want to believe about people.
That's
And
the point. Yeah.
and when it comes to actions, I know a lot of people, myself included, like I don't love dating apps. I feel like, you know, people don't really put their best foot forward on there. They don't. I feel like, yeah, you know, it could be better. The system could be better. But
Mm,
if you find yourself like getting jaded at using dating apps or something, you're just like, oh, no good men are out there. Okay, well, look somewhere else then. Like maybe go
totally.
start a new hobby, or through friends of friends. You have to like cast your net, rather than just like I have to give up because there's no one
Mm.
out there, when you've just like went into like one small area
A
of
pool of
all the
fish.
potential.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
there's a quote that's if you want to find love, do what you love. And like that for
Mm,
me was just like, why, people are like, I want to find love, but you're at home on your couch, watching Netflix for the whole weekend. How are you going to find anyone if you're just sitting at home? But if you're out there and maybe you love yoga, or you love, being at the beach or surfing, it's like if you're doing those things, you're like tenfolding, your capacity to actually meet someone, and someone that's aligned as well. So yeah, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my God, mental note, must not forget that quote.
I love that. Yeah, makes so much sense.
So I do a question at the end, but I actually want to change your question, which is a little bit special. What is the biggest thing that you've manifested today?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's difficult to quantify big. I
Or your
think
favorite one?
I have a top three. So one is a like amount of money which I had set to manifest by the end of the year. And then by I think it was like by March, I had manifested my amount for the year.
No,
And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm
that is
unstoppable.
amazing.
My second favorite was during lockdown, and I just had a lot of free time and I was very bored. I was feeling like, I mean, we all were kind of feeling those
Yeah.
feelings, but especially being overseas and, you know, knowing that you don't know when you're going to go home and see your family, it was quite a challenging time for me. And one of my friends had been entering competitions even before lockdown. She'd been doing that.
That's so,
And I
yeah.
would always see them and tag her in them because I'm like, oh, she's a competition person. But I never really saw it for myself. And I was like, I've got loads of time.
Mm.
I could enter some competitions. I'm like, message her. I'm like, can you tell me what to do? How to enter these competitions? A week later, we won our first competition, which was a
Oh my
crate of
God.
coconut water. I love coconut water. And I was like, this is the best day of my life.
That is
And
so
then I was like, wait, if it's possible to win one competition, then
mm.
it's possible to win more than one competition. And if it's possible to win multiple, then I intend to win a competition every single week.
Oh my God, I
And for
love
6 months, every single week, I would win a competition, from teeth whitening, money. I won a holiday, food,
that.
drinks, every
That
single
is
thing.
so
Like
good.
it was amazing. And I actually kept the spreadsheet as well.
Of
I
course
kept
you
a
did.
spreadsheet. No, it's $9,000 worth of prizes over the 6 months.
Holy shit. That's
Yeah. And
amazing.
it
But
was so fun as well.
it's so funny, like the people are like, there is a blanket rule, like I don't win things, I'm not entering. But I'm like, if you just entered, I wonder if you would actually win.
Yeah, it's funny, these arbitrary parameters that we set for ourselves, and then when you
Yeah.
can like break through your own belief system, you're like, that's
Mm,
interesting. And it became like, number one, it became like a game, and number two, it was an absolute expectation that I had. Like, I know I am winning a competition this week. It wasn't
mm.
even like a worry or a fear. I was just like, I wonder what one it's going to be this week, because I win competitions. That's just who I am. And even if they hadn't announced it by the end of the week, I'm like, well, they're obviously late in announcing it,
Yeah.
because
Uh,
why would it not be here? And
it's
then my last favorite would probably be from this summer. And on my vision board, I actually had this picture of me that I had photoshopped of me in Greece. So I was like, yes, I'm going to be living my best Greece life.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, at the end of 2 months traveling in Europe, I'm not going to want to spend the last week island hopping. It's going to be really stressful and carrying around. I had a lot of stuff I was carrying around. It's just like, I'm just not, I could tell already. I was like, I'm not going to be bothered with it. And I thought, I could go to Ibiza because it's quite close to Portugal, which was going to be my last stop. And I didn't really have any plans or any major expectations for Ibiza. And because I'd left everything so late to booking, the accommodation that was left was quite questionable. So I booked this place and I paid for like what you would pay for a 5-star hotel, but it was not 5-star vibes. But I was like, I guess like I'll book this because I'm not really sure. And then as the time was drawing closer, I'm like, do I really want to stay here? I was like, you know what? Like, I'm very happy just to go home at the end of the trip if this doesn't work out. And if I am meant to go, something better will come up.
Yeah.
And my whole trip, I was traveling solo and I was in WhatsApp group chats for solo travelers, and specifically one for Ibiza. And I'd seen this girl post that she was looking for people to come stay with her in this villa, girls who could drive. Again, I can't drive.
God.
I was like, hey, I can't drive, but I would love to meet up with you like when I'm over here. And she's like, oh, well, actually, like if you're just willing to share money on taxis, that would still be fine. It was meant to be me, her, and this other girl. The other girl pulled out because she thought she was a scam because she didn't have social media and she just only had a WhatsApp account. But I was like, nah, no red flags here, so it's fine. Yeah. So it's fine. And so I got to Ibiza. I was like, I guess if she doesn't exist, I can just like book a last minute hotel. But she did exist and stayed in that villa for a week for free. And it was just so beautiful, overlooking the ocean. I think there was like 6 bedrooms in there, just the 2 of us staying in. It was incredible.
That is amazing. If that is not expansive for anyone listening, I don't know what is. That is so cool. Oh, I want to go to Ibiza now.
It was so fun. So fun.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I love talking about manifestation. So I really appreciate your time and your smarts and wisdom. It was so awesome to chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And also,
before I forget, where can people find you? Where can they connect?
So you can find my podcast, the Manifest Edit podcast. You can find me on Instagram, Efia Sulter _. And I also have a free masterclass on the power of subconscious manifestation, which goes into, a lot of what we've talked about today and how to use both your conscious and subconscious mind to manifest and create longevity in your process, which you can check out by heading to efiasulter.com/freebie.
Amazing. I think I'm going to put that in the show notes. I've got it right here.
Even better.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have an amazing day. And for everyone tuning in, thank you. And we'll see you next week.